Okay, good afternoon and welcome everyone. I'm Jim Rooney, President and CEO of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, and I want to thank you for being with us today for doing business with Fidelity Investments. On behalf of the Chamber, we hope all of you are doing well on this little bit chilly November day, but it is November in New England after all. This is our 14th Doing Business webinar. A series we launched as part of our Pacesetters program to help minority business enterprises and suppliers hear directly from procurement professionals to better understand their specific buying procedures and practices. One of the things we've heard over the life of this Pacesetters program is that sometimes minority suppliers just don't know the door in, don't know how exactly to approach a particular company in Greater Boston about what kinds of things they might buy or procure, and how do you go about getting on the list for being considered for those opportunities. So doing business with is an opportunity for you all to at least listen to a company like Fidelity describe their approach to doing business, particularly with small businesses and minority-owned businesses. We know that economic opportunity is a huge cornerstone to achieving equity in our communities, and I'm grateful to all of our Pacesetters for their transparency and commitment to utilize their purchasing power to create a more equitable Commonwealth. We have a vision to close the racial wealth gap in one generation, and I invite all of you to join with us on this journey to create the systemic change in the way we do business to achieve that goal. Before we hear from the Fidelity team, I want to share a few notes. First, thank you to the sponsors of this program and all of our economic opportunity work, John Hancock and Eastern Bank. We're extremely appreciative of our continued partnership with these corporations who have put their hands up and said that they will do what they can to affect change. I also want to flag that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared on the Chamber's YouTube page shortly after the presentation. Finally, be sure to submit your questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A feature on the right-hand side of the screen, making sure to send to all panelists, or you can email questions to chamberprograms@bostonchamber.com. Now, I'm pleased to introduce today's speakers from the Fidelity Procurement team. I know that David Lunt was mentioned on the program, but he's unable to make it. But I'm pleased to say that we have another David in his place, David Diamond, Head of Procurement Analytics and Programs. David has been with Fidelity for over 20 years and so is fantastically well suited to kick things off for us today. After David, we'll hear from Kevin Simon. Kevin is the Strategic Sourcing Manager at Fidelity. In his role, Kevin leads competitive sourcing, the competitive sourcing process globally. Kevin joined Fidelity in 2015 as a team lead and is now a senior sourcing specialist. He currently supports the Responsible Sourcing Office of Procurement with a focus on diversity and equity from suppliers. Thank you for joining us today, Kevin. And we'll also hear from Chris Kasay. Chris Kasay is a vice president within the Fidelity Procurement Department. Chris has been with Fidelity since 2004, leading much of their work in the corporate audit department. Chris is also dedicated to DE&I and is an executive sponsor of the Procurement Supplier Diversity Task Force. In this role, Chris works to raise awareness within Fidelity about the benefits of using diverse suppliers. So welcome, Chris, and thank you for joining us. And with that, I'll turn it over to David to get the program started. David?
Thank you, Jim. And you'll see my title on your Zoom screen as Head of Supplier Diversity. As you mentioned, I wear a few hats with the procurement organization, running various programs. One of those is our Supplier Diversity program. I'm going to be sharing a deck here, so let me share my screen real quick and get it set up. Go to presentation mode. How are we looking for those in the panel where I can see your thumbs up? All right, thank you. Thank you. So a little bit, I wanted to start today by explaining a little bit about our supplier diversity program, which sits in procurement. And then we'll pass it off to Chris and Kevin to talk a little bit about how we do our sourcing and opportunities and categories within Fidelity. So first, a little bit about the scope of our supplier diversity program. As many of you are aware, Fidelity Investments is a global financial services firm. We're headquartered out of Boston. Of course, the majority of our employees and products and services are purchased all around the country. We have several lines of business. Our procurement organization that we're representing here is focused on the US-based procurement organization. International Fidelity Investments, Canada, UK they have a different procurement organization. So the scope of what we're talking about is spend with US-based suppliers. The supplier diversity program in itself has 2.5 people if you count me. So David Lunt is one of those. Terry Nemhart and David report to me in the supplier diversity program. They are both at a conference this week, but we basically set the program governance. And then we have 8 task force members. As you heard, Chris and Kevin are both on the task force. These are actual members in the procurement organization on the front lines, doing the work of strategic sourcing, negotiating, competitive processing with our suppliers, contracting events. So without the aid and the help of the task force to drive our initiatives through, we wouldn't be achieving the kind of success in our program that we're seeing today. Program started just 4 years ago in this quarter, Q4 of 2017. So it's a fairly young program. It started, prior to that, the only scope of the program was to provide reporting on diverse spend to some of a handful of our clients who were requesting it. But since then, you'll see that the program has grown considerably in scope. So I'm going to move. Some of these slides are going to be a little bit wordy. Not to be concerned, we will be sending out this deck and passing it along to all those who are interested. So after the meeting, you should be receiving a copy of this deck. So if you have any challenge reading any of it, don't be too concerned now. I'm going to be covering the highlights anyways. So a little bit of an overview of our program. First of all, it's important to know that there is a commitment at the executive level for increasing our business with diverse-owned suppliers. That comes directly from the top. You can see a quote here from Maggie Saravelli. She's our Chief Financial Officer. She reports directly to the chairman, Abby Johnson. She sits in our Boston corporate headquarters. Note here, the reason this is important to our presentation is that procurement, we report up into Maggie Saravelli. So she is the head of our department. In a recent all-hands meeting, our chairman, Abby, also mentioned increasing our spend with diverse suppliers as a strategic objective of the firm too. So we have a lot of commitment from the top to help us drive our initiative forward. By the numbers, so this past year, our fiscal year or our performance year ending at the end of September, we did business with over 350 diverse suppliers. And keep in mind, these are all US based. Between tier 1 and tier 2 spend, we had reached $260 million in spend with diverse suppliers. This was a significant increase over the year from our prior year where we were at 200. And we have a goal to increase it again by approximately another 50 or 60 million. So we continue to focus on increasing spend and increasing the number of diverse suppliers in our supplier network. And we have over 40 plus second tier relationships, both on the client side and with our prime suppliers. So approximately 20 of each where we're partnering with our largest, most strategic clients in their programs, and we're partnering with our largest, most strategic suppliers. on how they can help us grow and hire diverse suppliers in our network. So our strategy from the program is more around promotion of inclusion in our competitive process. When it comes right down to supplier selection, the most important priority for us is to bring on the products and services that are meeting the needs of our clients. And in doing so, we want to make sure we're casting a broad net. And when we're bringing in new competition, new products and services, where there'll be new suppliers in the network, our goal is to promote the awareness and inclusion of diverse suppliers in that process and bring them in. A little bit about the scope of the program here. So we recognize most of the major classifications in our supplier diversity program. I think that the top two where we spend are minority and women-owned businesses. These make up about 80% of our total diverse spend. We also accept disability-owned businesses, LGBTQ, all veteran types. Recently, this year, we expanded our scope to include disadvantaged business enterprises and also HubZone certified businesses. Many are certified in multiple areas. So like I said, the majority of these are women and minority-owned businesses in our supplier network. We have a strong partnership with our DEI team internally to procurement with Fidelity. Part of the strategy of the firm is to include suppliers in the discussion of diversity and inclusion. So as we have many internal efforts on hiring practices, equal opportunity employment, diversification in our employment workforce, we have several employee resource groups. Along with that partnership comes taking those learnings and taking the responsibility that we feel for our workforce and passing that on to our suppliers. We feel that diversity in our supply chain really provides us with the same type of benefit as diversity in your workforce. Those of innovation, competitive process, brand in the marketplace, all of those things make Fidelity a better place to work for and a better place to do business with as a supplier. Our key partnerships, one, we're speaking with them today, the Boston Pacesetter Chamber of Commerce program. We're also members of the National Minority Supplier Development Council, the Women's Business Enterprise National Council, the Cincinnati Business Accelerator Program. We are members of Disability In and on the Disability In Procurement Council, and also members of the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce, or NGLCC. These are all national certifying bodies. They're also advocacies for diverse vendors. They help diverse vendors with relationships with corporations like us. We highly recommend, if you're not certified by one of these national agencies, it's a good thing to do. Many large corporations have their eye on those certified by these five. So if you're not certified and you're looking to become certified, the links are here to these organizations about their processes. Registering with Fidelity. So unlike a lot of public or government contracting companies, we don't post contracts on a public external website. Fidelity has many, many lines of businesses, from institutional services to our retail business, real estate businesses, our outsourcing benefits, plan services, retirement services. All these different businesses have different business structures, different business leaders, different demand on the products and services and technology they require. Our procurement organization is centralized across all businesses, which means we have the challenge of developing the relationships in many different lines of business. So the needs of those businesses comes from them, and they engage procurement. And at that time, when procurement is engaged in the sourcing of new products and services, it's often incumbent upon us to go out and find the suppliers who are capable of delivering those products and services. It's part of our policy in procurement. When tasked with doing so, we would always include or the search for an inclusion of diverse owned suppliers in that process. The best way to be found is to have a relationship with our supplier diversity team and those that are looking in our portal for that information. So with that, the best thing for any business to do is to visit our supplier portal. A couple of things on there. There's a code of conduct you can read through, expectations of our suppliers. There's a little more information about our supplier diversity program there. You can click on a link there. But more importantly, there's a button on that site where you can click it to begin your registration. And it takes you to a third-party provider that we partner with to gather information for you to register your business with us. And it's a private portal for us to go look at suppliers who've registered. The supplier diversity team, myself, Dave, Terry, and the task force within procurement all get a notification when you've registered. So there's no need to email us. We're getting a notification. What we do then is we look at the registrations, we look at the capability statements, we look at the information about the company, and it's our responsibility to pass that information on to any specialists in those areas that we think would have an interest or an upcoming opportunity in that. So to do that, you visit that website, supplier.fidelity.com, and begin your registration. And if you have any general questions for the supplier diversity team here, you can email supplier-diversity@fidelity.com. And we'll be happy to answer any broad questions that you don't get answered from today's presentation. And then this bottom supplier diversity additional information is another tab on that website I mentioned at supplier.fidelity.com. It'll give you more information on our program. So about our spending, where do we have our supplier diversity spend? Not much different than most companies, tech companies, companies in financial services industry, where we're not in manufacturing, we're not a consumer of many direct goods and services that go into the product build. Our products are mainly technology platforms and software programs backed by customer service reps. So when we sell a product, the product is largely homegrown. We develop our own platforms, our own technology, and we provide our own employees as customer resources. So the largest part of our offering is no doubt professional services. Many of our labor force are staff augmentation or temporary services. Many of our IT software development projects involve contractors. And so a majority of Fidelity's spend, even in our technology space, is on the professional services side. And then you can see some of the other segments of this pie. Compute is our mainframe and hardware category. We do a lot of buying of components and technology through resellers that are diverse owned businesses. And then our real estate is large because there's a lot of subcontracting in the real estate space. So like many large businesses, we have like a national contractor for handling the facilities management at many of our sites. And they in turn do a lot of local subcontracting. A lot of this spend is in Boston too, where we have our real estate arm, Pembroke Real Estate, as part of Fidelity. And as many of you might be aware, we have a major project up there in Boston right now, rebuilding the waterfront. So we have actually a lot of spend a lot of minority-owned business spend going on that's coming through our real estate division. So we happen to be here during our year-end process. So October, November, and December are critical times for us to get all of our contract renewals done, get all of our purchase orders out the door. We don't start any new business in the fourth quarter. Typically, we have system freeze dates, we have invoice freeze dates for issuing POs, and then of course on December 31st, we need all of our 2022 contracts renewed and signed. So what we've done is, we took a look at upcoming areas and potentially in Q1 and Q2 of next year. So we think we have some opportunities coming up where there's renewals ahead. They haven't come to fruition yet. They're not entered in active projects right yet, but they're things that we can be looking into. So certainly if you're in any of these categories, you should be registering in our portal. You should also be reaching out to us if you think you have a specific niche area that we might be of interest in, and we can try to align you with the right opportunities when they come up. So I think that's it for me on our supplier diversity program. So I'm going to turn it over to Kevin and Chris, and we'll talk a little bit about our sourcing activity and how our process works with our businesses. Which one of you is going?
I'm actually going to let Chris go first, and we can stay on this slide here.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I mean, from a diversity task force perspective that, Kevin and I are on, and we support Dave and his team. As you look at some of these categories of spend or potential categories of spend for 2022, one of our objectives is to make sure that diverse suppliers get an opportunity, right, to compete in these upcoming deals. So one of our main initiatives is exactly that. So to scour the landscape, right? Some of it obviously relates to what Dave had mentioned and making sure you're registered and we get notification that you're interested and that you're in our portal. But then it's incumbent on us to make sure you get an opportunity to at least express, the abilities, the capabilities, I should say, the resources you have. And we're looking at a whole host of different ways to make sure that you do get involved. Some of the feedback we've gotten over time is, about the size of different suppliers, right? We're looking at ways of, potentially carving up contracts, giving out percentages of different types of work. So we're open and looking at all different ways to make sure there's equal opportunity across the board. So I just wanted to add that to this slide as you look at some of these categories, because some of them they're very broad and might seem overwhelming, but within each of these categories, there's a whole host of work, that we need done, that can be carved out. So with that, Kevin, I don't know if you want to kick off the final slide.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. We can go to the next slide, Dave. So again, there's going to be a lot of text here for the sake of time and going through. I'm not going to read through every single bullet point here, but in a sense, just want to cover high level some of the logistics of what is it to engage with procurement here at Fidelity. So again, starting in the sort of first bullet point is just Ariba. So Ariba is our procure to pay or source to pay system. That essentially means from the sourcing effort through the contracting phase down to POs and invoicing. That is our system of record that we utilize for engagement. So at some point, if your firm is selected, you will register on Ariba's network. You do not need to be registered in Ariba to participate in any of our any RFPs, so to speak, that go out at that time. But again, if you are selected, you will need to. So again, as sort of mentioned, so all our RFXs, RFPs, RFIs, RFQs, whatever have you that we utilize, that's our primary tool of use. But in addition to that, we also use globality. So again, just depending on the size and scope of the type of deal that it is, we also use another service, which is more of an AI powered platform for those type of engagements. So if you are sort of coming into our sort of ecosystem and being engaged as a potential vendor for a sourcing effort, you'll probably see one of these two tools utilized for that. Again, every effort is going to be about 2 to 3 weeks, so it's really going to be dependent, as Dave mentioned, sort of at this time of year. We're not sort of putting out a lot of new RFPs, again, just because we're sort of working through year end. But with that said, again, I'll sort of speak to ticket to entry into those sort of type of efforts, and of course, non-disclosures. Again, we do want to ensure that we have a confidential bidding process. So again, confidentially covered for us, and also confidentiality covered for you as a supplier. So we're not sharing your information with other participants. Just again, I'm just going to point something out here. So again, just be prepared to ask questions regarding the RFP. Again, it's right sizing. It is sort of looking to match needs, sort of what you specialize in. Sort of you've been engaged for a purpose. I'm always going to sort of reference what's also been brought up before by Chris and Dave, which is just registering through whatever registration portal. So again, part of our RFP process is we do go and try to source and look for potential vendors of a diverse nature for any of our engagements. That is something that we do try to do. And again, through Supplier IO's network, through the Globality, or suppliers who are in the Ariba network, we are sort of, again, scouring and looking for vendors. So being registered upfront is a very helpful way to do so. So again, we already have your information when those potential engagements come up. I'm going to go ahead and you can read through the rest as we send out the deck, but I am going to go ahead and go to the sort of being considered section. So again, just ensure that you're reviewing the opportunity as soon as possible. You want to ensure that you are clear on what the ask is, that again, you as a firm, your offering sort of matches the needs of what we're looking for again. Your ability to meet and exceed the functional and technical capabilities and requirements and specifications. What that really means is, I think it's pretty clear, but again, any RFP that goes out, any effort, whether the engagement is an RFP or not an RFP, it's just sort of going out there and looking at what is being put in front of you. And then also be prepared to just tailor your responses to impress upon what those capabilities that you have are. Keep in mind, your firm's been included for a reason, right? And that means just focusing on your true competitive advantage. We do, of course, want to hear what sets your firm aside, or sort of sets your firm ahead of the others who are competing. Because again, at the end of the day, the truth of any RFP for the most part is that we are generally going to award one participant at the end of the RFP. As Chris alluded to, we are sort of internally working on efforts where we can be more equitable and try to split awards for potential RFPs. So we can do more dual awards, or whatever the award is of a bit of a RFP, where we're doing less of maybe saying the single awarding of RFPs. Just express, again, you can go through all this other stuff, but these are just sort of the qualifying requirements that we sort of look at. So your availability and experience, competitive cost and time proposals. Then another point I am going to sort of mention here is, this is, I would say, a very important piece is, the first part is getting through the door, right? That is getting your foot in the door, whether that's sort of, again, that's why we're here right now, right? We're sort of lighting a beacon as a firm to essentially say, this is an effort that we are very sort of keyed in on, and we want to ensure we're offering those opportunities up to diverse suppliers when they come up, so we can do more business with those firms, because they're very important initiatives to Fidelity. But going through the effort, once you are awarded business, make sure that you're sort of having that ongoing performance management and then just maintaining that satisfaction level. It's one thing to get in the door, but what you really want, and I'm sure what everybody wants, is not really just the one-time engagement. It's sort of continued engagements and sort of increasing your footprint and getting more engagement. So again, ensure that you're sort of, whatever your team is in that winning proposal that you got to get the engagement, you're still maintaining that A team, so to speak, to keep that satisfaction while the engagement is going on through the life cycle of your engagement with Fidelity. And again, the last point, it's already been brought up before, but just ensure you're getting on that supplier list. That's a pretty important piece for us, just because we want to be very proactive about our ability to source and look for vendors. Reach out to us. Again, the emails have been provided as far as the registration portals and the tools that we use. So again, just ensure that you're sort of engaging us and getting on those lists proactively. I will sort of in there. One thing I did want to bring up, because this question does get asked quite a bit, and this is just more on the logistics side. It is sort of about insurance requirements. So yes, Fidelity does have minimum insurance requirements. That's really going to be dependent upon the nature of the type of deal that's sort of engaging in. So from if it's professional services, or if the contract is over a certain threshold, if it's professional services, if it's access to certain types of confidential information, that sort of changes. But it is sort of also from an equity perspective, the E and the D, E and I is, looking at those holistically as a firm and sort of seeing where can we sort of work with vendors who are smaller and diverse to sort of ensure that we're leveling the playing field in a sense when you're coming into any of these type of engagements. So I will stop there and check if Dave or Chris wanted to add anything on this piece before we open it up for Q&A.
I was just going to add that regarding the, our RFP process, it isn't a one size fits all. So, we're trying to create more flexibility. We're continually, reevaluating our processes again to make sure that, anyone who can be included is included and has an equal shot to succeed, in the process. So I just wanted to reiterate that what Kevin had said.
Okay.
Hey, I'll just add one more thing too. So we get a lot of questions targeted to us for who is your contact, or who is the person? Who do I talk to about, printing or IT services or software? The answer to that question is always the same. We're not at liberty to be giving out business contacts names around Fidelity, because they don't typically reside in like our group, right? So the answer to that is always the same. We have our eye on opportunities when they arise from those individuals, and it's our responsibility to then find the vendors. So the best answer to that question is register in the portal. Make sure you put the categories that you service, a good description of it, so that when we're getting these engagements from our business partners, and we flip over to that portal and start typing keywords for services we're looking for, that your name will come up.
Okay, David, should we start some Q&A?
Sure.
Okay, so well, let's start at the beginning. You've emphasized the portal and getting on the list. Amplifying that, if you would, what happens then? Is it strictly a digital exercise, or will the supplier that gives you his or her information and says, look, I think I have some interesting products or services here? Do you reach out to get to know them, screen them a little bit, even if there might not be an opportunity in the moment?
We do that on occasion, especially when it's a recurring activity, when we know it's going to come up over and over again. And that way we want to be proactive on this. And in some cases, if it's a very niche offering or something we're not going to need for years, it might not be something we look for right then and there. But what we do, and I'll speak for all of us on this call, and I almost on a regular basis, when those come into the portal, right? The portal, we have a shortcut to that portal from our internal tools. It is the first place for everyone to look. So we have 20 plus strategic sourcing managers working on engagements day in and day out all year long. We have research analysts that are researching markets for where we're not very familiar with who the vendors are in those markets. And they all have a responsibility to the initiative to be hitting this portal for who are the vendors that might be able to meet these needs. And that's the number one, that's like the one-stop shop for us. If they can't find an overview of a supplier in that portal, they are going to reach out to the supplier diversity team to do custom searches, where we might reach out to our partners in other databases we have access to. But we hope to find what we need in the portal. When we do, and when there's emails and then there's follow-ups, we tend to do soft introductions, or we'll make referrals to category managers in that space. And it's really becomes up to them to say, now's the right time. I'll have a conversation with them. But we want to keep them. The category managers have all. We're beginning the concept of having a bench of vendors that we've connected with, that we know what they do in each of the different categories. So as they build out that bench, and that bench just might be a private list of vendors that have registered that they've shown an interest in, and they think they want to be able to come back to that, whether it's 6 months from now or 3 months or a year. When the opportunity arises, they know they've met somebody. And so it's really about the relationships. And it doesnand help me to try to have a relationship with everybody. I'm not the one buying anything, right? So I have to find the right contacts and do things. And sometimes it's behind the scenes. And we will leave it up to that category manager to make a decision whether or not they want to engage.
So I'm hearing that, and each of you have emphasized this, getting on the supplier list in your system is critical, and in some ways an advantage if that's the first place you're going to look. But just to put a finer point, if it's not something that is reoccurring or piques your interest, do you close the loop digitally? I mean, do people get an acknowledgement of something that you're now on the list?
They get notified. We do there is a response that basically says your registration was successful and we know it's there, right? Okay. And then it's really a waiting game.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt if you can, on an annual basis, if you have things to change or new commodities, new markets that you've entered into, new products or services, that you might update your profile. Submit an updated registration, but from there, our third party monitors the certificates of diverse status. So you want to make sure if you're registering as a minority owned business that you're uploading a certificate so that it stays up to date.
Okay.
And if you're registered in this portal, you're registered for every other large company that uses this portal, this service too. So you can select other suppliers, other clients that you would want to let them know that you've registered in your portal. And once you've done it once, then it's easier to just continue to add your registration. So it's not 100% about doing business with Fidelity, but this is we use one of the largest supplier diversity portals in the marketplace.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so you'll find that once you're in there, you're going to have an easier time with many other companies as well that use the same firm. Yeah.
That's a great message for the day, I think. Kevin, I think these questions are for you. You answered one about insurance, and another one is about terms of payment. But you did emphasize if someone's responding to ask questions. And I'm just wondering, because we've heard throughout this Pacesetters program, sometimes those requirements, whether it's terms of payment or insurance requirements, become the obstacle themselves, even if I've got a good service or product. Is there, I mean, do you work with suppliers if you're interested in doing business with them on some of these requirements?
Absolutely. I would say that's something that we have collectively come together and had conversations about because, again, as Chris alluded to, we've got feedback, right, about sort of some of our processes, but we've built our walls up to a certain height, and again, we want to lower the drawbridge quite a bit to let more people into the actual ecosystem. So, yes, that's the E part. So again, I'm emphasizing again, the equity part is to ensuring that the questions are the right size, the insurance requirements are the right size, and whatever from a contractual perspective is sort of right sized for firms of certain size, right? It's one thing to be doing business with another firm who has, 60,000 associates and has the sort of footprint to have people who sit and do this day to day. It's another thing to sort of a two-person shop to say, we're going to hold you to the same standards, so to speak, right? There's certain things that are just going to be standards regardless, right? Yeah. But again, we do want to ensure that we're being more equitable in our sort of sourcing of vendors. And when it comes to things like you said, insurance, we want to make sure we're more equitable in that as well.
So
I don't know if anybody else wanted to add anything.
Yeah, you piqued my curiosity because on your slide you had a question that I've not seen before since we've been doing this, which was, are you prepared to scale up? And I thought that was an encouraging question to ask. I mean, it kind of implies that once you get in the door that you may be asked to bring something to scale. Can you talk about that question a little bit?
Absolutely. Again, I think a big part of our effort, and I'll allow Dave, Chris to chime in here as well, but a big part of our effort when we talk about scaling up is we understand the size of the firm when we're engaging in the process, right? If there are questions we ask in our RFPs about your company profile, about the size and scope of your actual company, but sort of in scaling up is we essentially want to be able to, when we do business with sort of smaller vendors or diverse vendors, is again, whatever the engagement is, hopefully that infusion of capital going into that company will allow them to, again, scale up their operations. So again, as the opportunity grows and you grow along with it to continue to sort of support that effort or more efforts that come along down the road. Because again, getting your foot in the door is one thing, continuing to sort of grow yourself inside of sort of our company is another thing.
Yeah, and maybe to that end, in some of these conversations, some companies have emphasized, I don't know if the right word is partnership, mentorship, the relationship, even the coaching that goes into that scaling up. Is that something that once someone is a partner with you, that you engagement as well, just because you want them to succeed too?
So,
go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, so that's something we've been looking at in our roadmap, and we're talking about in the coming year to 3 years, we're going to begin to expand our focus on internal suppliers and their performance and performance development. It kind of goes hand in hand with scaling up. We don't currently have a supplier mentoring program in place. Mm-hmm. Right? But it's been part of our multi-year plan since, how do you get to that point? For the last couple of years, our focus has been on the growth of our external relationships and networks and bringing in new diverse supplier talent to the firm. But we do realize that, one of the challenges any organization faces is incumbency bias. Right. Mm-hmm. When suppliers are up for renewal, the business units with their relationship with their current suppliers have a favoritism. We would like that favoritism to be with a small diverse owned business, in that they want to give more business to that business, right? And so that maybe they were brought in as doing on an IT project for one piece of a software development. We'd like to see that they've added employees with different skills that could, they could do more work. And that their work was highly rated when they were in here. They can have larger project teams. They can take on a larger chunk of a larger project. Same is true with any category, but we know it's easier to drive more business into the existing supply chain than it is to recruit and bring in new business. And so we're turning our focus internally a lot over the next couple of years.
Got an interesting audience question, and it's really asking for feedback. What issues do you find in interacting with small local businesses, MBEs, that that are challenges for you in doing business? What's the biggest issue or obstacle in the work you do? And I guess a companion question is, as you're doing the work you do and knowing the kinds of opportunities that Fidelity might present, what do you wish there were more of out there in terms of, types of suppliers that you feel like, you could do more business with MBEs if you could, if there were more of them in the marketplace?
Do you want to start that one, Chris?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know necessarily if it's, if the issues stem from any of the suppliers themselves, right? I think, from our perspective, it's getting them in the door, being able to, some of the feedback we've gotten, and again, it's on us, is some of the smaller firms, we're a conservative firm by nature. So, we ask an awful lot of questions. We expect a lot of things from cybersecurity and those types of things. But, the great thing is we're reevaluating that and, making sure that we're asking realistic questions. And so that we can get, everyone an equal shot, at the business. So I can't say, for me personally, in my experience, with some of the smaller firms, that there's necessarily been any issues, with the firms themselves. It's making sure that we eliminate the blockers on our end to make sure we get the opportunities. And just to circle back on kind of the scaling up, it's our focus to get, the diverse suppliers in the door, have them perform well, right? Which we don't necessarily control, but we assume they will perform well. And as that happens, our business units, if you're performing well, they will continue to utilize you, right? And give you more and more work. So to your second question around, what if we had more of, in the current environment, a lot of it is related to, the digital space, technology. Everyone wants to, convert to the cloud and migrate to the cloud. And so those technical resources, professional, services resources, are certainly in high demand these days. I'm only speaking from my experience, and I only cover a portion, of the spend, for Fidelity. But, the beautiful thing about, Fidelity as an enterprise is we have a whole host of different things that we need. And it, as that slide alluded to, it runs the gamut, from real estate and architects, if we're building something new, to, developers, because we want to create a new, new application. So, there's a tremendous amount of diversity in just the level of work we have and the resources we need.
That's great. There are more questions coming in, which is good. I don't know.
I'll add
yeah, go ahead.
I'll simply just add one thing, and this is just sort of because the question sort of piqued my curiosity and made me think of something. This is just an interesting one. I would not essentially say it's a handicap to any sort of small, diverse vendors, but sort of an interesting thing in evaluating RFPs is sort of a client dependence, right? I don't know that's necessarily something that you can account for, but sort of the question about how much of your income is sort of, how much of your income is based on a single client, right? That's always a interesting topic of conversation that comes up when evaluating RFPs.
Okay. A couple of quick questions. You mentioned that certifications. Do you require certification?
We do.
Okay. So get certified.
So get certified, and it doesn't have to. It has to be through, a recognized state, local, national authority. So we do not manage our own certificate program, but we do have our third party who has line of sight into 300 databases around the country for local chambers of commerce, state programs. So like state of Massachusetts, certified minority-owned business or whatever. If you're certified locally, your certification should be picked up by them, and we would know you're certified. And we will find you in the search. And of course, you can make sure if you're registering on the Fidelity portal that you can include that as well.
Okay. A question about tier 1, tier 2. Are there subprime opportunities? And is the portal still the place to go for that? Or do you ask the prime subs to?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of both, and it's I hate to say it's new territory again, but for us, but this is another part of our program where the task force has got some goals this year to figure out how we do subprime subcontracting plans with our primes better. In the glory days of procurement, a decade, 2 decades old, there's always been this strategy around supplier consolidation, supplier rationalization. Let's get all of our spend with one single giant supplier who can manage the whole country, right? So we tend to have, a legacy culture around large national suppliers and food services and real estate, facilities management services, those global players. And what we want to be working towards in this coming year is an understanding of when they're providing their services to our local markets, that we have a say on who they're hiring in those local markets, or if those contracts are up for bid, that we are beginning to execute better with subcontracting requirements and plans. So we do want to have some say. We do want to say, well, hey, for our Westlake campus in Texas, who are you going to use? We want you to use this supplier for this, or here's a couple we would recommend you do business with, and have them be able to be contractually obligated to bring them on the contract. That's new territory for us. Some of the businesses on this call might be well more versed in that process than we are, because they might know that they are participants in a subcontracting plan with larger private suppliers.
Yeah.
We're doing this more in our real estate space and our construction design and architect space now, and getting more experience with this in this waterfront project. But we want to be able to do that in other categories as well.
Well,
So yes, the short answer is yes. Register on our portals, because our category managers in those prime relationships is going to begin to be having conversations during those renewals about tier 2 level requirements that we want to have reported back to us.
Okay.
So if we can make those introductions, that would be great. We actually, had some success a couple of years ago with the Pacesetter program, where we invited our prime food services supplier to a tasting event that the chamber was hosting for Pacesetter, and we made an introduction there. And then they ended up using that the kitchen or the supplier that they met for one of their other clients, not Fidelity, but it was still the relationship, right? We still connected a prime supplier with the supplier. So food services and construction, and those are the big ones, really.
Yeah, you brought up real estate, and there's a question here that I think at least in part you answered, but I'll ask it anyways. In addition to registering in the portal, can companies get a chance to present to or make themselves known to the real estate group? I guess that's Pembroke, right? But do people in that space or think that their best opportunities are in a real estate department still go through the portal, or is there an opportunity to speak directly?
Yeah, I would have to say you'd be highly unlikely you're going to get yourself into a presentation with the head of the real estate.
Yeah.
one of our closest relationships in procurement is with the executives of the real estate branches. And so we have influence and a relationship with the primary real estate category manager who deals with all construction design, all real estate leases, all the real estate development projects and facilities management going on all around the world. So if you have something to offer, I think it's best if we, let you, send that person your capability statement so that you become part of the bench that he's looking at when these opportunities come up.
So I'm hearing you say, use you guys to get access.
Yeah, it is. We have Fidelity's global procurement policy is that all business units must engage procurement when doing business with suppliers.
So there you go.
So it's by policy we need to be engaged in all the sourcing activity.
Yeah.
But it's also that policy that makes it very hard for us to know upfront what's coming, because it's coming from all angles and around the globe. So Fidelity US has regions in Ireland and India and US.
So we have a question related to the what's coming, and I know that you had the categories of spending, and I would guess that they're fairly consistent over time, but looking at the first half of next year, are there categories you expect will be sort of have more activity than others?
I don't know if we'd say there'd be, based on what we're seeing as we head into year end, the migration, I've mentioned it previously, but the migration to the cloud, a lot of the technology type work, professional services is still going to be a growing need for us as well, specifically in the technology space. So just to name a few.
Okay. Well, we're about out of time, but I did want to give you an opportunity to take us behind the impressive numbers. And I love storytelling. So if any one of you would like to share a success story of the program, a particular supplier that you were happy to see it work out, and, tell us a good story.
So I got one that was a year in the making. And it goes to the process from the very beginning. So we were entering, a new RFP, and especially amid COVID and shutting down many of the sites and turning to a virtual world. We were looking for virtual fitness providers to replace the on-site like gym fitness providers that we had. We don't know much about that market, so the real estate owns that part of the business. They reached out to procurement. They reached out to and the category manager there reached out to my team where the research analyst sits and said, what do you know about this market? So we did a couple months of research and identified suppliers. And part of our job is to go look at the portal and find diverse suppliers. And we did all of that. And it was a long, drawn-out process. It's a large contract, but from the beginning, and because of our research and because of the portal, we ended up awarding a national contract to minority-owned, women-owned virtual fitness provider. So it was a really big win for us in that space. It showed all the different ways we're committed to this space working together, from the category manager to my team and the analyst team and the portal and all of that working together.
Well, thanks for that story, and I think it just re-emphasizes use the portal. It seems to be the way in, and a big takeaway for me is that Kevin and Chris and David want to be helpful and want to, in addition to the digital portal, be a facilitator of your ability to connect with Fidelity. So thank you to the team at Fidelity for a fantastic presentation and insights, which I know I and our audience have found extremely informative. This is our final Pacesetters doing business with the 2021. It was a great way to end. Hope to see everyone next year when we'll hear from even more Pacesetter companies and maybe even cycle some more through as more information becomes available. In the meantime, I wanted to highlight some other opportunities for events we have coming up at the Chamber. The Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce invites you to nominate an individual below the age of 40 for our Boston Future Leaders 2022 cohort. It's a great program. Nominations are open through the end of the year. Beginning January 21st, we have our next transformational DE&I certificate. This 6-session program provides participants at any level of their organization with the tools they need to achieve true inclusivity in their organizations. And on January 27th and 28th, we have our Flagship Pinnacle Awards. The Pinnacle Awards is the premier event for women in business and honors incredible leading women for their outstanding contributions to the workplace, commitment to enhancing the quality of life in the region. This year, women in Greater Boston have once again shown their resiliency and commitment to success despite national and global crises. We'll gather more than 1,200 people to acknowledge and celebrate the achievements of our honorees. You can nominate individuals and register for all of our programs by visiting bostonchamber.com. And by the way, the big Pinnacle Award winner last year from Fidelity was Pam Everhart. That's the caliber of people that you see honored through our Pinnacle Awards program. Once again, thank you to all for joining us. Have a great evening and have a happy, joyous, and safe holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.